Everyone, my name is Katie Bradford Osborne. I am the founder and curator at Roaring Artist Gallery, and this is our very first artist talk for our Hope exhibition, and I am so excited to hear from these artists today. We have Amanda Proeber and Hannah Lowe Corman with us, and I'm just really excited to hear what they have to say about their art and to get to know them a little bit better. So we'll start off with a quick little tour through the exhibition. All we're going to do is stop at Hannah and Amanda's artwork, and but that way you can see what they have in the exhibition, and then we will launch into our artist talks. All right. All right, can you all see my screen? Perfect. All right. Our Hope exhibition. I am so proud of this exhibition. Our guest jurors for this exhibition are Heather Kirtland and Marissa Huber, and I think that they did such a beautiful job. Heather also did a lot of the design for the show, and I'm just so pleased with how it turned out. Great. Yeah, here's Amanda's piece. I'm really excited to hear more about this piece. All right, and here is Hannah's piece. And I'm excited to hear what you're doing with this collection also, Hannah. This is really cool. I feel like I have seen what is under here before. So I'm really excited to hear what you're doing with this. All right. Okay, well, let's launch into our artist talks. We've got Amanda up first. I'm going to read a quick intro for her, and then I'll hand it over to you, Amanda. Amanda Proeber is a white, queer, non-binary, disabled visual artist and activist living in Chicago, Illinois on unceded Potawatomi territory. Their work is multidisciplinary, including drawing, painting, video, performance, and witchcraft, and focuses on themes of the healing power of nature and marginalized bodies as sites of evolution. Amanda has a BFA from Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design and an MFA from Maine College of Art. All right, Amanda, I'm going to hand it over to you. You can screen share if you'd like to, and take it away.
Okay, you can see that I'm moving things on my screen, right? Great. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you to Roaring Artist Gallery for inviting me to give a talk. I'm really excited to talk about some of the different artworks that I'm working on lately. I do have a bachelor's degree in painting, and I considered myself a painter for a long time. I did very serious oil paintings. And I also have an MFA in interdisciplinary studio arts. And I went into my MFA program thinking I was going to come out a painter. And, you know, things always change when you go to graduate school. I came out a performance artist, a video artist, really doing a lot of things and kind of taking on the ethos of life is art and my art is my life. So this is just a picture of me actually before I did a performance for Rebirth Garments, who is a designer and artist living in Chicago. And I'm also just in my garden here and I get a lot of inspiration from nature. So I take on a lot of different roles in my life. We all do. And I thought I'd just kind of like give an introduction because these roles do play an influence in my art. I'm an artist. I do lots of different type of art. I'm an activist. You can see me on the bottom middle photo doing an animal clinic. I've done a lot of work with animal rights groups. And on the bottom right, you can see me foraging. I am an avid forager and mycologist, and I get really a lot of inspiration from nature for my work. So I'm excited to show you some of that. And here are some photos that I've taken on some of my nature walks. I had already mentioned that I'm an amateur mycologist. I love studying mushrooms and learning about them. When I go out into the woods and I interact with fungi, I get to really experience like a whole new world. They're very interesting beings, and getting to know them and their nature has really like increased like everything in my life. And also just being in nature does that. It gives me a lot of like solace and grounding, which has led me to a project that I have just started working on somewhat recently. It's called The Search for Green Man. And this is just an image I stole from Google just to introduce what Green Man is. But Green Man is a figure in lore and folklore, and he is often shown as someone who is constantly in both states of becoming and becoming destroyed. He's made of plant materials. He is in a constant state of evolution. And I learned about him a few years ago when I watched the movie Wicker Man, and I just became obsessed with him. I really believe in the Green Man. And when I go on my nature walks, I search for Green Man. These are a few photographs of green men that I've found in my walks, and I really adore searching for them. There's green men all over the forests, and I love finding them and encountering them. My first kind of foray into this, other than the photographs, is some drawings that I've done. So on the left is a drawing that I did of Green Man, and you can kind of see the evolution of that piece into a digital work. And I'm still working on that one. It's still a work in progress, but I'm really excited by this project. I'd like to do some installation and performances and like make costumes for myself to kind of become Green Man. But that's just kind of some things that I'm looking forward to doing in the future. Another really, another piece of mine that is really inspired by nature is this digital collage called Micus. And Micus, the word comes from putting together mycology and Jesus. I'm not a religious person, but Jesus seems like a really awesome guy. And as I started creating this drawing, I really just felt like this was Jesus who I was drawing. And I love the idea that Jesus, who was this very benevolent being, had like mycological roots running through him. And here's a couple details, just so you can see there's a lot of like layering and details in those lines. I'm pretty happy with this image, and I just started creating prints of it. Another drawing that I have in here is this drawing called Kin. And so I'm not a scientist, so I'm just going to preface that with what I'm about to say. But about 1.58 billion years ago, animals descended off of the fungi line and became animals. So we evolved from fungi. And something that's really interesting about that is that the structural makeup of human brains is very similar to the structural makeup of mushrooms, which are the fruiting body of fungi. So this image is just kind of exploring, like that a part of our body is actually really close to mushrooms. It's kind of something that inspires me. I turn this into a coloring page too. I'm interested in creating a coloring book on mushrooms. So this is kind of one of the more finished images that I have of that. Next is a drawing called Interdependence. And if you've ever read the book Emergent Strategy, this was a emergent strategy by Adrienne Maree Brown. This was created to be a compendium coloring book for that book. If you love nature, I can't recommend enough reading Emergent Strategy. But this piece is called Interdependence, and it's really just speaking to the interdependence that life forms have upon each other. The fireflies are interdependent with the mushrooms are interdependent with the worms, and the worms are interdependent with the moon. It's a kind of simple image for me, but I really enjoyed making it. And it was the first image that I ever created as a coloring book, which got me kind of going down a whole coloring book rabbit hole. This next image is called We Can Heal Each Other. And this is a digital collage that I created, I think 2020 to 2021. It might have started in 2019. But this is kind of going along with the same themes of interdependence. I created this last summer, and the uprisings were happening, COVID was happening, and there was a lot of strife in the world. And I really believe that we have a lot of abilities to heal ourselves with, our loved ones. We can heal ourselves with plants and plant medicine and with animals. And this was just kind of exploring that. And I really enjoy the kind of like caring quality in this image. I also like how mycelial networks are kind of becoming a part of these humanoid bodies. And back to painting. I haven't shown you any paintings yet, even though I have a degree in it. I did start painting again this year. And this is a work that I just recently finished called Adaptation. And I got these antique fashion magazines from a thrift store. You can see the label at the bottom. It's like Journal des Demoiselles. And I was like, oh my God, I have to like collage that and make that into art. And I've started doing something that's really interesting too, not only, doing collage, but using ephemeral materials in collages. So in this piece, I have a dried peony that my mother gave me. I have some dried candied limes that a friend had gifted me. And I think it's a really interesting way to make art with materials that are unarchivable in this moment where everything is really in flux. There's a lot of things changing. And just kind of recognizing that this is a work of art, but I can't promise how long it's going to be archivable for. And it gets to live its life however it does. Here's just a side view. I consider this a painting, but obviously it's a collage and has a lot of different elements in it. And next we're going to be moving on to the orbical series that is the painting Flighty that is in this exhibition. And on the left is an image of me before I went to a nightclub, or maybe after I went to the nightclub. I love playing with fashion and creating really awesome outfits. And previously going dancing, even though there's no dance parties happening in the last couple of years. But I made this a few years ago, and it's interesting because it's now like the themes of it are now, and actually the materials too, are now playing a role in my current artworks. The Orbical series is the word itself is a mashup of the word orb and oracle. And all of these works in the series are circular or oblong. And I also saw them as kind of oracles or images or objects that could be oracles or that people could look to as oracles. And I'm also using eyes a lot in the theme of this series. So this is one of the first paintings from there, and it's called Queer Patterning. You can see that all of these kind of have a similar shape to a pupil. And I love playing with that. And that's part of the eye aspect or the oracle aspect. This one in particular is kind of just a celebration of how fabulous queer people are at playing with color and coming up with really amazing patterns. I don't think it's exclusive to queer people, but I just know a lot of queer artists and who I'm friends with who just like do really amazing things, often in their everyday life with just the clothing that they're wearing. And I want to celebrate that in my art. This next piece is Pink Insanity. It's called Pink Insanity. And I got the name for this from a Janelle Monáe song, Pink. And the lyric is pink like we all go insane. And I think we can all agree that pink is a color that is really loaded, especially in America. And there's kind of an insanity about it, about who can or can't wear pink, how pink can be used. But it's just a color, you know, colors shouldn't come with that much political background. One thing that I really love about this piece in particular is that the taxidermy eyes that I'm using in this start becoming kind of like other eyes, almost like bee eyes or insect eyes. And I'm really enjoying playing with the taxidermy eyeballs, which are a big part of the Flighty painting. Flighty is a work that I actually think I started before 2019, but I don't always keep track when I start something and when it becomes a part of another work. Flighty, I'm really excited about. One of the things I really love about this piece is that I started using crafting materials in it. I started using fabric and I can't remember what this trim is called. Maybe it's just trim. Things like that in my artworks. And I come from a family of artists. And it's a family of artists who don't consider themselves artists because they were women and they made crafts. But their artwork, their crafts are just as beautiful and meaningful as things that we call art and put in museums. So starting to use those materials in my art kind of like connected me to my family who has done that in the past. Another thing I really love about this painting in particular is that the taxidermy eyes kind of take on a life of their own. And they interact with the butterflies. To me, I almost feel like that they're becoming another creature. So I think that's super fun. And then I just wanted to put a plug in for a coloring book that I did last year for Alive Rescue. And this is a coloring book to raise money for Alive Rescue, which is an animal rescue here in Chicago. And here's a couple images in it. We did it last year, right when kind of the stay at home started. So it's called Rescue in Place. And it's still available on that website. Yeah, so these are some of the different ways that you can find me if you're interested in following me. I am on Instagram, I have email, I have a Patreon, and pretty soon I'm going to be getting around to putting out my Etsy. So those are the areas that you can find me. And I am done with my presentation, I think, on time. Oops.
Oh, that was so cool. Does anyone have any questions for Amanda?
I do actually. I love what you said about using the materials that are not able to be archived, because that is something that I think about a lot. And even in materials that potentially could be archived, not knowing how to make it last or preservable or whatever. So I really appreciate what you said about that. And I appreciate that you're using those things and putting it out there like, this is how it is today. And I can't promise that it's going to be like this tomorrow. Have you been doing that a while, or is this something new?
I started doing it in the last year when I really started foraging, kind of in earnest. And yeah, I have some pieces that I didn't show in here that are with mushrooms that I've collected, and I have some like sunflower bodies. And yeah, a lot of working with it is like how can I get this to be, if I'm working with like a sunflower, it's like I have to dry it and then I have to like, like let it sit and settle. And that's just the first part of it. And then you figure out how to work with it. And then also know that it's going to like start falling apart at some point too. I haven't done it a long time, though, because I guess I haven't done it a long time, but I'm really interested to see where it goes. And I think it's also just like an interesting thing to think about in this moment in time, like how long do things last? Like how long can we preserve these things? I know the art world or like museums don't like that, but I still think it's interesting.
I was really moved by that concept as well. I think that coming out of art school, it's hard to pick that up and to let go of that concept that everything needs to be archival. I know I have a photography background, and in school it was such a huge thing. It's using archival materials, always using archival materials. And then I had a professor once who said, no, you're giving archivists of the future a job. Just keep doing what you're doing and don't worry about it so much. And I think that concept of letting artwork have its own life for whatever that life looks like, and that it is still very important exactly the way that you've made it with whatever life that it has in this world. I think that's a really powerful concept. I really, really love that as well.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Amanda?
Can I ask another question? so and maybe you mentioned it and I missed it. Would you mind talking just a little bit about what your kind of schedule is? Like, do you create every day, or do you have a rhythm to it?
I am lucky to be currently unemployed. So I have an open schedule. And I think my main thing, which I learned from another artist that I follow online, is try to have creative time every day. Like and not doing the work of art, but the creative time. So I try to have at least 5 days a week where I have creative time, and for 1 hour or so. And then I do have days where it's longer. And I'm also disabled. I have mental health issues, so my days don't always go as I want them to be. But letting myself just keep to something simple and then work from there is really, I guess, effective for me right now. So I do like an hour a day of just playtime. And then I also have to schedule in all the artist work time where like you put your slideshow together, like you put your online stuff. I have to schedule that stuff too, but that's the business of art more.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed you have so many aspects to your life. And I think that it was really, really cool to get to know you and that aspect, and see how all of it is in some ways part of your art, your work with animals, your performances, your work in your garden. And I think it's all sort of part of a full artistic life. And that was really interesting to see.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. If anyone is familiar with like the Dadaists, they have that kind of ethos of artist life, and um, I have decided to just live that way. And I
Mhm.
think it really changes your art when you're able to change that mindset.
I agree. I
Yeah.
do. I think it allows you to do a lot more too. It
Hmm.
sort of loosens up what the concept of art is, and that's such an important thing for artists.
Yeah.
I mean, as a gallerist, obviously, I need people to continue making physical art too. But I think there is something to be said for it being a lifestyle and that being part of your artistic practice. So,
Yeah.
at least for me, that's how I like to live my life. Well, if we have no other questions, Amanda, thank you so much for sharing. This was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Let me pull up Hannah's intro here. All right. Hannah Lowe Corman is a painter living and working in Houston, Texas. She has studied art and art history at the Maryland Institute College of Art, the Sorbonne, the Art Students League of New York, and the Ann Arbor Art School. Her abstract acrylic paintings have been shown at the Maryland Federation of Art and the Roaring Artist Gallery, among other solo and group exhibitions in New York, Texas, and Maryland. And her large-scale paintings have been published in My Wedding magazine and The Perfect Palette. Her work is held in private collections across the United States. Hannah is diving headfirst into scientific research and fundraising to advance a treatment and eventually a cure for LMNA-related congenital muscular dystrophy via the 501c3 nonprofit LCMD Research Foundation, of which she is the president. This endeavor brings her the greatest hope. And this particular foundation, I'll go ahead, I'm sure Hannah will speak to this in a little bit as well, was the inspiration behind what we're doing here with the Hope exhibition. And um, I am just so proud, Hannah, to be able to be a part of what you're doing. It's amazing. And what you've already done is amazing. So I love that we get to have you here, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for having me. Thank you for, um, you know, for joining us in this way and helping to raise awareness and raise funds for uh, mm, this foundation that's obviously near and dear to me. And yes, I will kind of get into it a little bit throughout my chat, but I will share my screen here. Let's see. Okay, can everybody see that? Okay, so this is the painting that was selected for the show. It is called A Drop of, and it is part of a mini series, I would say, of kind of hope related pieces that I've recently worked on. I won't say done, because actually, as Katie alluded to, this one, and I think you can see me too, this one is a painting over another painting. And actually, what I have done is repurposed a whole bunch of, I had done a whole floral series that I repurposed pretty much all of them into this kind of hope series. But I will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So as Katie said in my bio, I grew up in Maryland. I moved around to a bunch of different places in college, as you can tell from all the places where I've practiced art, but actually I don't have a degree in any sort of art related field. I have degrees in finance and in French. And it wasn't until about 5 years ago that I actually decided that art was going to be the more major focus of my life. I've, always studied art, created art growing up, but it was almost like a light bulb aha moment about 5 years ago when I also was unemployed and thinking like, what do I really want to do? Do I want to continue doing finance things? Do I want to continue doing nonprofit things, which is something else I had done in the past? Or, here's this art thing that I've been doing my whole life. And hey, what if I actually centered myself around that? So I've very much enjoyed leaning into that and learning so much, and being, not having an artistic degree, I think has been difficult, and has a positives and negatives for sure. In this world, I think that it has, I don't have any like preconceived notion of how my, art life should be. But on the other hand, then I'm also maybe at a disadvantage for not knowing what I don't know, if that makes sense. So in any case, I've explored many media over the years, and I've kind of shaken out into the world of acrylics, and mainly just for their ease. And I have 2 children, so it's a lot of, catch as catch can in terms of creation. And I find it just an easy medium to work with, and fits into my lifestyle. And so, as you can see, I think I'm in my art studio, which is a closet, but it has a window, so that is lovely. It's not very well organized or set up at this point, but I'll just give you a little like do all sorts of just stuff. My big exciting purchase this year was this little wheelie thing to keep all the paint on, and I was feeling very proud of myself for actually organizing something and not just keeping it in a cardboard box, which is what I had been doing previously. So that's kind of a little bit about how I got here, and how I practice my art. And what I've really found in trying to talk more about my art and try to share more about it is I've been able to reflect and really think about how I make art and why, instead of just saying like, here's some stuff I did. It's like, well, how did I make it? Why did I make it? Because I think, as probably most artists can relate to, there's something just like innate about it. It just, or any creative person or anything you're creating, sometimes an idea just hits you and you just gotta see if you can make it, see if you can bring it out. So I really dove into the work of kind of cataloging and journaling and questioning, well, what really am I doing? Because there has to be some sort of method, right? It's not just totally random. And what I kind of came down to was that what I've been creating is kind of an outpouring of my meditation practice, of my mindfulness practice, and living as best I can in the present moment, and kind of day-to-day living, which I think we're all doing now, but was something that I had been practicing even before this pandemic situation. And so I think that the art I was creating was kind of an extension of that, where it was more about the feeling of making the art and how is my body feeling doing it, almost like an expression or a dance or an exercise, if that makes sense. And it's like, what does my body almost need today? The way that somebody who goes to the gym might say like, oh, what does my body need today? I need to run, or I need to lift weights. And it's almost that. It's like, I really need to just like move my whole body and create something really big and flowy. Or like, oh, I really need to just like zone into something very detailed and I was almost thinking like with Amanda, with your coloring books, it's like that sort of meditative thing, but it's very close and small motions, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think what happens really is I oftentimes have meditated about some sort of idea or dreamt about some sort of idea, and then felt like, okay, how am I going to put this down on canvas or on a piece of wood or whatever piece of paper? And then I try to just let myself go and not think too much about it. Once I've set myself up with my materials, then it's like, okay, just start playing and just see what kind of comes out of it, because that's probably what's meant to come out of it. And then I like to kind of let something rest for a little bit. I'll leave it up on the easel or against the wall and, live with it, walk around it, hang out with it. And this is kind of this part where maybe it's a little bit more mental, and I'm calling it like my critique and tweak portion of creating, where it's like, okay, this little area I don't like it. I don't know what's going on with it. Let's see what else I can change. And so kind of going back to things over and over again. I think for what I've heard from many artists, and I totally feel, is that sometimes it's hard to know, like, this is done. Okay, stop. And I also get very anxious that like, I'm going to press on and then hate whatever I've, wish I could rewind a step, but with this medium, it's hard to like recreate something that you've painted over. So there's definitely a balancing act. So I think if you come over ever, I have lots of stuff that's just kind of like hanging out around the walls and around the rooms, because it's like, I'm still pondering that one. It's not like put away, it's not finished. So that's kind of my creation process. And that's it. Oftentimes it's creating kind of these, like this painting here that I did in 2017, this kind of flowy, abstract kind of, maybe not calm, but maybe subdued or serene type piece. And that was speaking to me for a long time. As we've talked about a little bit, so last year in 2020, my younger son, Austin, who's here, was diagnosed with this rare form of muscular dystrophy called LCMD. And we had no idea. He was 6 months old, and he wasn't gaining enough weight. So his doctor admitted him to the hospital to make sure that he was fed. And I think in our minds, we were like, okay, well, then we'll just like be on our way and everything will be fine. We were in the hospital for 3 weeks, and they did genetic testing, and they came back and said that he had a new mutation that neither my husband nor I have. And it results in this rare and fatal form of muscular dystrophy called LCMD, and that there's nothing to do, and there's no treatments, and there's no cure. And some kids live a few years, and some kids live a few more years, but like they really can't say. But that obviously put a complete, damper on the rest of our lives. And we got that diagnosis in February of 2020. Then we were in the pandemic in March of 2020. So I say, in my mind, I believe that, the small silver lining for us of having to stay home was that we really were able to wrap our heads around this new unexpected occurrence in our lives. He doesn't eat by mouth. He has a G tube. So like that whole kind of constant 24-hour feeding schedule and the medicine and the exercises and just everything. So truly everything else, like creating art, went out the window for time, but also just for like grief and lack of interest. So it took us about 6 months, I'd say, to really get into our groove of our day to day and change the mindset of like, this awful thing has happened with our child, to like, okay, but he's still our child and he's still here, and we have to like live every day and make every day the best, versus almost just like waiting for the inevitable, if that makes sense. Like it's not something to like get beyond and like brush up and then, okay, my life can resume. But like, how do you then resume your normal life, integrating all of these new challenges and knowing that there's like some inevitable demise at some point unknown. So one thing again that the pandemic afforded us was the time to start diving into medical research around his disease and reading what was already published, reading tangential things, and reaching out to scientists who are either working on this disease or related things. And I think given that everything for everyone was virtual, people were more willing, I think, to speak with us. And so to that end, we were able to make a lot of connections with a lot of different folks in the medical field and research fields and other rare disease parents and other not-for-profits. And we just kept taking one step after another, said like, well, what if we do this? What if we do this? Let's just take these steps and see where it goes. And what happened was we ended up creating this 501c3 nonprofit called the LCMD Research Foundation, which is specifically for translational research into this disease. So not just understanding the disease and the mechanisms of the disease, but also putting money towards making treatments that can go into people. There's about 200 kids in the world that we know of with this disease. And here's a picture of Austin. As you can see, he's quite happy and he's quite smart. He's 2 years old now. He cannot sit up. He cannot hold up his head. He can't stand or walk or do many things that a typical 2-year-old can do, but he still is quite happy, and he can do lots of things. He still enjoys lots of things that a typical 2-year-old likes to do, like reading books and counting. And above him here are some pieces of art that he and I created together actually this past spring. He can't move his whole arms range of motion, but he can move his hands and his wrists. And so he creates these line drawings with markers, and then I kind of colored them in. So it's like our Austin and mom collaboration, which I'm quite proud of, and I quite enjoy. So yeah, so that's a total, just, I don't know, change to life, right? Like a change to the path you thought you were on. And so what is that going to mean for my art practice, is a question that was open, is still open. This is kind of where I had been, right? Where I had come from, these kind of just soft, abstract, movement-based pieces. And like as Katie said, the one in the upper right-hand corner is one of these large paintings I did that was actually used for a wedding, like photo backdrop, which was really fun to do. And I actually made it when I was pregnant with Austin. It's about 5 feet by 9 or 10 feet, I think. But you know, I had this whole, actually I had a whole series of paintings planned out in my head before I had Austin, and I kept like putting it off. I don't know why I wasn't starting it, but I kept thinking I wanted to do it. And then eventually it was like, that doesn't feel relevant to me anymore. Like I don't have the drive to make that, those pieces that had been bouncing around in my mind. So then it's like, what is bouncing around in my mind? And so kind of, I will say that like my art practice has certainly taken a back seat and is certainly catch as catch can here and there. And so the creation is not as prolific as maybe it once was or could be. But I have started a few, taking on a few small commissions. Like these little guys in the corner here are actually like 3x3 minis that I'm doing on commission for somebody. And then these other two pieces, these are kind of the pieces that, are the repurposed pieces, because they had been this whole floral series. And instead now was feeling like, you know, there's a lot of like cloudiness and there's a lot of like covering, but there's still hope. And this is why I was so grateful to Katie and the Roaring Artist Gallery for this theme of this show, because I think we can all relate to the idea that like, no matter how horrible something feels, and even in the worst moment of it, there always is like a seed of hope, I think. Even if you can't see it, even if you can't feel it right, like at that minute, eventually you will. And so this whole series, like, whoa, yikes. Each piece was kind of like, so this one that was in the show was called A Drop Of, and it kind of just reminded me of this little like raindrop or teardrop. And, you know, I don't remember exactly which the names of each of them were, but, you know, like a seed of hope, like something that can be replanted and maybe bloom and maybe grow into something bigger. Same with like kernels of hope, right? Like just, I almost thought of like corn kernels, like little popcorns, and what are they going to expand to? What could they become? What's the potential of them? And then this is my own actual, like one of the first times I really played around with almost like 3D media on a painting, because again, I have this fear of like, well, how am I going to preserve this? Like, what do I need? Like, this is just beads and sequins, but like, what do I need to shellac this with to make sure that it stays forever and ever? Like, whatever. You're giving me confidence, Amanda, that I can just leave it as it is and and move on and be happy with it. So those are some of the things that are kind of coming to me now, and I'm just looking forward to exploring, repurposing. I'm enjoying going back through some of my old pieces and being like, this is fine, but like, what else can I do with it? Like, there's got to be something more interesting, something more relevant right now that is speaking to me. So where I am really is really just giving myself permission to explore and experiment and just kind of dump those feelings out as they come up, those feelings of hope, those feelings of despair. You know, I'm kind of drawn to this like black and white and gray palette right now. So I'm excited to see where it goes. And I just thank you again to Katie for putting the effort into this and putting the application fees towards the foundation. And we are very hopeful that, you know, we can create something for these kids. So I appreciate it, and I'm happy to take any questions. If I can figure out how to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That was Working on not being teary.
Yeah, there's a lot of non-art information as well.
But no, I think that it has a lot to do with your art, and the way that you are taking it and moving it into your art is really inspirational and really beautiful to see. I think this most recent series, this Hope series, it is such a beautiful thing to me in a lot of ways. I think you could see it almost because you're covering up these bright floral pieces, but in some ways, I think you could look at that surface level and say that that seems kind of bleak, but in the end, it's beautiful. And seeing that through that window, I feel like there's a lot of your life, and there's a lot of what's going on in that, and that's just a really, well, it's a really beautiful thing. It's a really hopeful thing, and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we have any questions for Hannah?
I have a quick question. Do you ever regret covering up a painting that you once liked?
Yes. But what are you gonna do? It's too late. Got to move on.
There's a lot of bravery in that, I have to say. I have a one artist in particular that the gallery represents, and every now and then she will message me and say, I have a new image, you need to take down the old one, and it's like totally different. I'm like, you are so brave. There is so much bravery in taking a piece and completely changing it, but I think that that also makes a lot of sense for your life, and that level of bravery. And I think in a lot of ways, it's our level of priorities, right? As artists, we prioritize beauty in a way that is, it doesn't really align, right, with what life is actually like. So that's really cool. Do we have any other questions for Hannah?
I don't know if I have a question, but I wanted to say thank you for talking about like how your son's disability changed like your life. I think that's, you know, so many artists are disabled or caretakers of people who are disabled, and that affects us a lot. You know, Vincent van Gogh was a disabled person, and we don't talk about him in that way, but he made art through it. I really loved just the idea of seeds in your work, and that the painting started off as something else and like is going to turn into something else. I don't know, like as someone who worked because I do plant stuff, like that idea, and like it's just reflected in the painting itself that it's gone through transformations. I think it's really fabulous.
Thank you.
I think so too. And one thing I wanted to mention that I love in this new series is you can see your brush strokes. It does have that 3D effect that your work, I hadn't seen in your work. As someone who was familiar with your work before, I had not seen before in your work, and it's really interesting to see. It's almost an emotional type movement, and that's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I was thinking about that too with the you know, in the covering up of something else, like how can I incorporate what was underneath in a way, like with the brush strokes? Because I think if I had tried to maybe make it very flat and perfect, it would have looked like trying too hard or something. Because I think the thing underneath it wouldn't meld, if that makes sense. It would be a little too, I don't know, juxtaposed.
Mm-hmm. I think that too, the thing underneath it is just as important. And I think that lends that sort of weight to what is underneath it.
Yeah. Thank you. I was going for it. So thank you.
Well, it's been wonderful. It's turning out to be a really beautiful series. And I just love that you've shared it with us and with the world. That's important work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Hannah?
Oh yeah. Actually, I really loved this series. I couldn't see them that well that you did with your son. They looked really amazing. What were they made out of?
Oh, well, he just does marker on paper, and then I just did marker to fill it in. Mostly markers. Some of my other son got these like they're almost like gel crayons. I had never seen them before. They mush a little bit, so I was using those a little bit and just regular marker. And actually, honestly, some of those are just on the back of scratch paper. They're not even on like nice white paper or construction paper. They're on like computer paper with something on the back.
I
So
love
thank
those
you.
pieces. They are beautiful. Well, do we have any more questions for Hannah? Well, Hannah, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Katie.
Both of you, Amanda and Hannah, this has been absolutely wonderful to hear from you. And I am so grateful to you for sharing. I'm so grateful to you for sharing with our gallery and for being a part of what we're doing with the Hope exhibition. And I'm grateful to all of you for supporting these artists and for supporting us at the gallery. Well, if we have no other questions for our artists, we will go ahead and wrap this up for this evening. But thank you all for being here. This will be posted on YouTube very shortly. So for anybody who has missed it or who missed the beginning of it, you'll be able to go back and hear anything that you've missed. And once again, this is Katie Bradford Osborne from Roaring Artist Gallery. Thank you so much for being with us and have a wonderful evening. All right.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.